Hiya, I'm a Zamen, and it's been a while since I've covered a video game, so let's talk about one. Specifically Blight Dream by Kanao, Teriyaki Tomato, which is a very nice slow burn mystery centered around its protagonist, Michiru Orihara, as she attempts to uncover a missing year in her memory while suffering from a disorder that prevents her from creating new memories. Now, Teriyaki Tomato might sound familiar if you played the wonderfully dark Blank Dream, because it's the same creator. Blight Dream is actually kind of a sequel to Blank Dream, but is done in a whole new dimension. Blank Dream was a 2D RPG with sprites and pixel maps, while Blight Dream is a 3D first-person explorer game. It's kind of designed like a first-person dungeon crawler, like the early S&T games, or Etrian Odyssey. I think the Persona Q games were in this style, and the only first-person dungeon crawlers I know are made by Atlas. Huh. Anyway, that's enough introduction, so allow me to take you through this delightfully short mystery horror game. The game opens with a scene of someone begging for their life, pleading for their assailant to stop, but the plea falls on deaf ears and the assailant seemingly cuts their victim down, before laughing and saying, "Now, it'll be forever." From there, the game cuts to our protagonist, 16-year-old Michiru Orihara, as she awakens and begins her daily routine. First by heading to her desk and retrieving her memory notebook, where she reveals that a year ago she was in a near-fatal car crash that took the lives of her parents. While she was able to survive, it came at a cost. She now has this medical condition, that prevents her from being able to form new memories. Though I should specify that this condition is not total amnesia. She still has all of her memories from before the accident, she just can't make new ones after the accident, leading to there being about a year of things she just can't remember. To cope with this, each night she broadly writes down what she did so her future self will have some form of recollection, because otherwise she'll wake up not knowing what day it is, completely fresh each time. You got that? Good. From there, she heads to the kitchen where she meets her older brother, Yu, not Narukami. He's a 21-year-old college student who is currently staying home to take care of Michiru since, well, their parents are dead, so he's gotta step up. Even if he is terrible at cooking and a pretty awkward dude, at least he's well-meaning and protective. And he's also clumsy since when Michiru walked in he broke a plate, so she leaves him to clean it. To pass the time, Michiru decides to watch some TV, turning it on only to be met by a news report about the ongoing Mashiba Hospital serial murders, where 3 people have apparently been killed. Strangely enough, Mashiba Hospital is actually where Michiru was treated after her accident, as the hospital is frequently mentioned in her memory notebook. Before she can learn more, the TV is suddenly shut off as Yu tells her, "Don't watch TV. You don't need to watch TV." But he doesn't elaborate further, instead going up to make dinner while leaving Michiru in the dark. Michiru tries not to dwell on it and goes about the rest of her uneventful day until it's time to go to bed. She writes down the day's events, listing, "Yu broke a plate. The news said something about a murder at Mashiba Hospital. Yu got mad when I watched TV." With that, she goes to bed, telling herself, "So long to today's me." Because the Michiru of this single day is effectively dead. Come the next day, everything she experienced and the development she might have is lost. But let's not dwell on that, because it's a bit too early to get moody. The next day, Michiru awakens and begins her daily routine by popping open her memory notebook, only for it to look a bit odd. All sections of it are crossed out in a harsh black ink, with the notebook only reading, "You broke a plate," and nothing else really happened that day. Michiru finds it a little odd but rationalizes it, saying that maybe yesterday's self decided against writing something. It's probably nothing to worry about. With that, she feels like the house is kind of empty, so she decides to head towards the front door and maybe get some nice fresh air. Only for... Once again, Yu stops her, telling his sister that she can't go outside because if she needs something, then he can go get it. No big deal. Michiru tries to tell him that she just wanted some fresh air, but he tells her she can't. It's dangerous. She's still recovering and can't get into another accident. Deciding to heed her brother's somewhat irrational warning, Michiru relents and heads back to her room, filling the day with some reading. When it comes to writing down the day's events in her notebook, she makes sure to include how strange Yu acted, making a note wondering if he was always that strict. But before going to bed, she still feels uneasy about her previous entry being blacked out, so she decides that she'll start writing down any important entries in a new second notebook. She isn't sure why past entries are being blacked out, but surmises that maybe her emotions are getting unstable. After all, if she tampered on entries a prior day, she wouldn't remember it. So with her mind set, she produces a second memory notebook and decides to keep it hidden in the back of her drawer, because ever since she was young, she always hid the most important things there, so there's a good chance that her future self will do the same and come across the journal. With the new idea set in motion, Michiru goes to bed and bids today's self goodbye, awakening the next day to another blacked out entry in her memory notebook. But like yesterday, she thinks nothing of it. And that brings us to the game's meat, as this game is all about investigating while trying to dance around Big Broski Yu, planning actions accordingly to investigate certain areas when he's not looking, to slowly piece together whatever he's trying to hide from Michiru. To do this, the game has an in-game clock where after Michiru performs a certain number of actions like entering a room or investigating X amount of objects, time passes forward. Here's a rough map I made of Michiru's house. Our protagonist starts each day off in her room, while her brother Yu is a bit random. Sometimes he'll be chilling in the living room, reading a book. Other times he'll be on the balcony for his company mandated smoke break. Sometimes he'll be showering, or he could be taking a dump, or he could be in his room. And on certain occasions he actually heads outside for grocery runs. Whenever he's not in a room, that gives Michiru the opportunity to learn something new, because if he's in the room when she's investigating, then, well, I can only assume he hits her over the head with a sack of potatoes and chucks her back into her room. And that's our game's general structure. Dodge Yu, plan your actions around him, and avoid being found out. That explanation out of the way, back to the game. As Yu is taking a dump, Michiru digs around some boxes in the living room and uncovers the TV remote. Apparently, after she turned the TV on a few days ago, he decides to just hide the remote to discourage that behavior. Taking the remote with her, Michiru hides it away after writing about it in her notebook. A few days pass, and Michiru decides to look through Yu's room since he's been acting odd the past week, though she does wait for him to take a smoke break and then storms his room, where, looking through another box, she finds... Unable to explain it, Michiru decides to flee because, as far as her memory notebook tells her, Yu hasn't been injured anytime soon, and the clothes don't look like he was the one who was hurt. They're just covered in blood. What could it mean? Writing it down in her notebook, Michiru goes to bed and awakens the next day only to find out that her previous entries have been blacked out. She then spends the next several days taking nap after nap after nap back to back because, well, out of game, she needs to watch TV and needs to wait for him to be out of the house. And, well, this is just the best way to get that going. Once Yu is out of the house, Michiru plops down on the couch and, like any 16-year-old girl, watches the news. I would assume. According to the news, 3 people have been killed by a serial murderer who is still on the loose, with authorities being no closer to finding the culprit. The 3 who were killed were all linked to the Mashiba hospital in different ways, either being staff, a patient, or a relative of a patient. The killings all occurred within a short time span, with the most recent one being less than a month ago. With that, Michiru powers the TV off and returns to her room, wondering why Yu didn't want her to see this. Her best guess is that he just wanted to protect her and didn't want her to get entangled in whatever's going down at the hospital, because those murders started shortly before she was dismissed. And because this sounds so important, she decides that she'll write it down in a second memory notebook. And when looking through her drawer for a journal, hey, she finds a memory notebook, because apparently her past self had the same idea. Go figure. Jotting her information down, she reads through the notebook and finally realizes that her memory notebook is definitely being tampered with. A thought she finds terrifying because it means her memory is being manipulated. Shaken, she tries to hide the second memory notebook away, but finds a book called The Mirror World, Works of Michiru Usi. And this is a huge callback to Blank Dream, the game's predecessor, because Michiru Usi was the protagonist of Blank Dream, and she became a painter in the true ending, so go her. But back to Michiru here in Blight Dream, she flips through the art book and finds the artwork absolutely stunning, saying that it sinks into her heart. But as she looks through it, her head starts to hurt, so she puts the book away and goes to bed. Yet as she sleeps, she has a dream, recalling a memory from 3 months ago during her stay at Mashiba Hospital. It's when she was receiving the diagnosis for a memory disorder and laments how this memory issue has taken away her emotions and feelings of attachment, because she feels disconnected from anything she might accomplish going forward, leading to a sense of apathy, because to each Michiru who wakes up, each day is almost like their last day on Earth since it'll all be forgotten. Honestly, complete memory loss is probably as close to death as you can get without dying. Ugh. Happy thought. Michiru, she goes to get a drink because all that thing was too depressing. Also, I should mention that the following sections of gameplay shall be in very poor quality. Yeah, OBS kinda just panicked, threw up, and screamed during this moment. I think it's the fog effect? I'm not sure. On my main screen it was smooth, but on OBS it's incredibly choppy. I'm sorry. During this section of the game, it swaps from a first-person perspective to an isometric perspective. Kinda like, well, the only example I can think of is Sonic 3D Blast. In this section, Michiru is navigating what's supposed to be a hospital to find the vending machine, but as you can see from the slideshow that's playing right now, the hospital is labyrinthian and doesn't quite make much sense. It's absurdist, like that print by MC Escher, Ascending and Descending. This is done to emphasize how the layout of the hospital doesn't make sense to Michiru. Every time she wakes up, she needs to relearn the layout. It will never make sense to her. Combine that with the dark figures here. These are people who Michiru can't even vaguely recall. Their faces and appearances left no impression on her faltering memory, so they are just obstacles to her. Plus, during this section, whenever Michiru speaks with any of the people, she is far ruder and coarser than the meek girl she presents herself as during the sections inside her house. After fighting through the 1 FPM, she makes it to the vending machine where she has a chance encounter with another girl, Mirai. She happens to have the same last name as Michiru, that name being Orihara. It's a simple meet cute because they get confused when someone calls out Orihara, but they laugh it off, and it only gets a little awkward when Michiru mentions that she'll be forgetting this meeting ever happened. The pair says their goodbyes and Michiru feels bad because it'll be really awkward next time they meet. She vents this concern to her nurse, a Miss Takanashi. Wanting to help, Miss Takanashi gives Michiru the idea of starting a memory notebook, but warns her to only write down things broadly and not too much, as an overload of information might be taxing or overwhelming. And therefore the memory notebook began. The next day, Michiru eagerly goes to meet Mirai, and while awkward, the two become friends, bringing the dream to a close, allowing Michiru to wake up, and miraculously, she remembers it. She can remember the full dream, and can recognize it as a memory from the past, a memory that causes her to sob. However, she doesn't feel sad. Deciding to brush this feeling aside, Michiru checks her notebook only to find another section of it blacked out, with the only note on yesterday reading, "It was an uneventful, unremarkable day. I decided I should probably spend tomorrow just relaxing in my room." Which is worrying for today's Michiru because why would her past self insist on such an action? Needless to say, she doesn't heed that supposed advice and goes on out, wanting to try and remember more of what happened in the past because maybe something else will jog her memory. Also, I gotta mention, going forward, each day Michiru wakes up, she always remembers this dream and the events from that memory. It is permanently remembered. So anyway, stepping out onto the balcony, Michiru decides to stop and smell some daphnes that are in a pot outside. Though when she takes a look at them, she gets a flash of a memory. Gaining a headache, and since she just woke up, Michiru decides to go to her room and rest. When night comes, she jots down the experience in her notebook, writing that, "Looking at the daphnes made some kind of memory flip through my mind. Paintings? Flowers? Blood. I can't describe it very well." Thinking it to be a wee bit important, she decides that she should write it down in a separate memory notebook. Looking for another notebook, she finds a secret second one that her past self had been writing in. She writes it in there too and puts it away, only to find an art book, Mirror World, the works of Michiro Usi. Flipping through it, she finds a painting of a bloody Daphne, which is the exact image she saw when looking at the real flowers, learning that this painting is called Blight. As she stares at this painting, her headache only worsens, with it feeling like her head will split open. She puts the book away, but understands that the painting Blight has something to do with the blank period in her memory, finding resolve in wanting to know what importance it could possibly have. With that, she bids goodbye to today's version of herself and sleeps. Waking up the next day, she finds that her notebook has been blacked out yet again, with it only reading, "It wasn't a very eventful day." Not thinking much of it, she decides to continue trying to jog her memory. So when Oni-chan Yu is taking a shower, Michiro decides to slip into the shower room, and this is not what you think it is. It is not degenerate. It's not what you think it is. You see, the shower room is actually 2 rooms. Room 1 having a sink and a laundry machine, while room 2 has an actual bathtub. So no gross Oni-chan shenanigans. Michiru decides to look through used clothes which are lying on the washing machine. Sifting through them, she finds a key. The key to her parents' bedroom, which this entire time has been locked. Taking it with her, Michiru darts back to her room and contemplates how to handle this theft. Should she write about it in her notebook, saying that she'll give it back the next day? Or not even bother writing it down, instead stowing the key away in the back of her drawer with the second memory notebook? Obviously, she decides to just put the key away in her drawer, because after all, it's just a key. What's the big deal if it goes missing for a few days? But if you do decide to have Michiro write about the key in her notebook, then, well, it just gets stolen in her sleep, making it pretty clear that, yeah, Yu is most certainly the reason why her notebook is being blacked out. But like, well, I hope that's been very obvious. Back to Michiro, a new day comes and goes and Michiro doesn't find the key, so she doesn't enter her parents' room. So she decides that she'll look again in Yu's room. There she boots up his Epic Gamer PC and finds a suspicious folder on his desktop, but it's password protected, the hint only saying that the password is the beginning. Ominous, right? So, feeling that this is important, Michiro decides to look for any clue that might be related to this so-called beginning. And look, I spent half an hour looking to the clue to open this folder way too long. I am very annoyed, because the only reason why I couldn't get the clue was because I was neglecting Michiru's condition. She forgets things every day. The clue, the beginning, is referring to a photo frame of Michiru on the day she was hospitalized. It even has a date, the 20th of March, and that's the password for the file, 320. However, for Michiru to be able to input this date for the password, she needs to see the photo frame first and then go into Yu's room. The entire time I was doing it in the reverse order, only looking at the frame after leaving Yu's room, thinking that our girl here would remember the date for the next time. God, my annoyance withstanding. When Yu is off on his company-mandated smoke break, Michiro sneaks into his room and unlocks the file, finding a list of people. Kaide Takanashi, age 24, nurse. Seichi Hinohara, age 54, painter. Mirai Orihara, age 16, high school student. Michiro recognizes Takanashi and Mirai, that being the nurse who treated her and the friend she made at the hospital. Naturally, she's pretty freaked out because Yu is definitely hiding something. So she flees the room and covers her tracks. Regrouping back in her bedroom, she jots down this development in her memory notebook and has the idea to... Okay, I think you get the point. We've done this enough times. She writes it down in the second memory notebook too. And something to note earlier is that when Michiro watched the news broadcast, the deceased were listed as an old man, a woman, and a girl, with them being hospital staff, a visitor, and a patient. Combine that with you having a bloody shirt, and you get the conclusion that Michiru doesn't come to. As the next day, at night, Michiru by chance finds the second memory notebook and looks through the information her past selves have gathered, realizing that Yu is obviously hiding something that's related to her missing gap. The memory gap is somehow related to The Mirror World by Michiro Usi, and that there must be something important in her parents' room since Yu is carrying that key around. So it must be important. With that, she resolves to go to her parents' room tomorrow, and to ensure this, she puts the key in her pocket and doesn't bother writing it down. Going to bed, she then dreams of a memory from 2 months ago at Mashiba Hospital, And the fog's back, so OBS is violently vomiting and shaking throughout this section of the game. Again, sorry for the slideshow, but it's all I got. One day, while wandering the MC Escher halls of the hospital, she finds a poster advertising an art exhibit for the up-and-coming artist Michiru Usi and her newest works. A personal exhibit called The Mirror World. The poster has a few examples of Michiru's works, and Michiru is getting kind of entranced by them. As she's looking over the poster and looking at the art, an older man, a Mr. Seichi Hinohara, appears and strikes up a conversation, saying that he actually used to be Michiru's teacher, and that Michiru should go check out her works. After all, the art that Michiru makes is a testament to her strength, because he reveals that Michiru once tried to take her own life, and while she lived through it, it came at the cost of losing her memories. The anecdote strikes a chord with Michiru, who feels like she can relate to the struggle that Michiru must have overcome. And with a bit more incentive from Seichi, she decides to make plans to attend. The next day, as Michiru is chilling in her hospital room, Mirai drops by to say a hiya, and Michiru asks her to accompany her to the art exhibit later. Though a little embarrassed, Mirai agrees and Michiru is just ecstatic. At all these new developments, Michiru is happy. She reflects on how she used to think that her life was basically over thanks to the memory issue. But with the memory notebook courtesy of Nurse Takanashi, Michiru has been able to live life and actually look forward to the future. She can make new memories, and she's been able to forge new connections, like with Mirai or even now Old Man Seichi. But beneath this positivity is a lingering sense of despair and fear. Fear of loss. Michiru says it best with these following lines. It wasn't easy writing every little thing that happened during the day each night. But that's why it was so scary. All these people and events, the precious days I was slowly building up. If this notebook were lost, it'd all be gone forever in an instant. Just that one small thing. If just by one mistake this notebook got lost, then I would never. I didn't have to explicitly write down these fears, but I'm sure yesterday's me and earlier me's had the same unease before going to sleep. The scene then cuts to the day of the art exhibit, which is a bit of a trove of blank dream references with paintings like Crack Smile. And we also get to find out that this game is set 12 years after Blank Dream, because Michiru is 28. And this is not her story. Main girl Michiru wanders through the exhibit talking with Yu, Mirai, and Seichi before splitting off and looking at the grandest exhibit, Michiru's newest painting, the ominously named Blight, which according to the description written by Michiru, it can be described as follows. This is myself and my regrets. Every night I mourn my mistakes and think of my lost past. It must look like a disgraceful, ugly thing. The meaning of Daphnes is unending. They bear poison berries just as I bear my regret. And so I leave it here, by the way of my precious brush. This message and the art itself just connects with Michiru. She can feel the pain and regret that Michiru imparted onto this work. She can understand what Michiru must have gone through. At the age of 16, Michiru nearly died, but survived at the cost of all her prior memories. For 12 years, she lived without knowledge of her past or prior connections. And Michiru, freshly awake after the life-threatening car crash, can relate, but not in a one-to-one. Michiru can remember her past before the crash, but she can't make anything new. In a sense, she's kind of like an inverse of Michiru. I can talk about that later. Looking at the painting, Michiru comes to what is her understanding of this painting. The sorrow of loss is an eternal poison that stays with people forever. She realizes how she can never forget anyone close to her ever again. Instead of writing down her feelings into a notebook, she can just write it into herself with poison. The dream ends as Michiru wakes up with a splitting headache. Her memories are starting to come back. They were never gone, just out of reach. She knows she's close. Soon, she'll be able to remember everything. And since this is a new day, Michiru checks her memory notebook for the last time. In it, she can see that much has been blacked out, with only a single message being legible. A warning to tomorrow's me. Don't try to remember the past anymore. Don't try to remember the past anymore. Don't try to remember the past anymore. I think you get the idea. Even with the creepy warning, Michiru is undeterred. She is resolved to uncover her memories, no matter what they may be. Then she feels something in her pocket, the key to her parents' bedroom. She doesn't know why she has it, but if her yesterday self left it there, then it must be important. So she makes a beeline for the room. Big Brother Yu is making his final gambit. He knows that Michiru took the key at some point, but doesn't know where it is. So he patrols the hallways constantly, making sure that she can't ever reach their parents' bedroom, because something is in there. He doesn't even let her go into the kitchen. Whenever she wants to use the bathroom, he lets her and then quickly rushes her back into her room. This is the final obstacle. To overcome it, Michiru needs to be clever. So while Oni-chan is occupied in the hallway, Michiru slinks into the balcony to reach the kitchen. In there, we just let her cook. Eventually, Broski realizes that someone's cooking, so he barges into the kitchen all panicked and asks what she's doing in there. But Michiru plays dumb. She just says that she's making a meal. Bro sighs and offers to finish up cooking for her, but Michiru brings up how Yu is an atrocious cook and would likely burn down the house if he tried, and he agrees with her. With his spirit sufficiently broken, Michiru plays her final card, asking Yu to go to the store and buy some soy sauce since they ran out and they'll need it for the meal. Thinking his sister might have actually hidden the warning in her memory notebook, he agrees and heads out to the store, which prompts Michiru to instantly make a beeline for her parents' room. Whether the stove was still on or not, that's not important. Inside her parents' room, she finds that most of their belongings have been boxed up. She peeks through every box until she comes to the dresser. Opening it up, she is met by a single item, a lone fruit knife stained red. Looking at it, Michiru realizes she's seen it before. She used it during her last meeting with Mirai, recalling a memory from 1 month ago. Not long after the art exhibit and seeing Blight, Michiru found a way to ensure that she would always remember the new connection she forged. Atop the roof of Mashiba Hospital, Michiru speaks with Mirai, the two reflecting on the recent murders that have taken Nurse Takanashi and Old Man Seichi from them. Yet while Mirai is melancholic, Michiru is just off. She says that she will never forget Takanashi or Seichi, because they will live on in her as a poison. For you see, Michiru no longer fears losing her notebook. She has found a way to always remember. The painting Blight has taught her that sorrow of loss is a poison that stays with people forever. The hole in Michiru's heart will condemn her forever. And it's then that Mirai realizes what Michiru has done. She killed them. She killed Takanashi and Seichi. Their screams for mercy and pleas for her to stop will never stop playing in her head. The feeling of regret and pain over this action shall haunt Michiru for the rest of her life. She cries every night. She has given herself trauma that will never fade, an effect that will always linger each time she wakes up, even after she's forgotten the prior day's events. Hearing her ramblings, Mirai asks, "Then you don't regret it?" To which Michiru says, I do regret it. Which is why I don't regret it." A paradox. Michiru wants that pain. She wants to feel the sorrow that will never fade. It's how she'll be able to remember, and she wants to do the same with Mirai. So she brandishes a knife. Despite showing some shock, Mirai faces Michiru without fear, and tells her that she doesn't mind if Michiru kills her, because as it turns out, Mirai suffers from a terminal disease that will kill her no matter what. She never had a future. Her family abandoned her, and she had no friends. No one needed her, so she doesn't care about herself. But Michiru needed her. Michiru wanted her to come to the exhibit. Michiru made her feel needed. So if Michiru kills her now, then so be it. She doesn't mind. But she does bring up a point, asking why would Michiru want to always remember this terrible pain instead of all the good times? After all, it's the good times that she wants to remember. Michiru doesn't have a response. Mirai approaches her, saying that she won't resist, but that killing probably isn't worth it. The memory notebook is probably a better way to keep her memories. At that, Michiru lashes out, screaming, "I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong," and stabs Mirai. The memory comes to a close as Yu barges into the room, furious that Michiru is still trying to dig into her past. He tells her not to worry. He just needs to put her back to sleep again, and it'll make everything okay. Hearing that, Michiru tells him to just stop. She remembers everything now. She has reacquired memories that she'll never forget. So she tells Yu that she'll recite everything from Mashiba Hospital, and if she's correct, then he has to agree to end whatever's going on. And Yu responds,
"If you can't tell me the truth of the year you couldn't possibly remember."
So Michiru begins, reciting the entire story as follows. The cause of her memory disorder was a car accident. A year ago, her parents died in the crash, but she lived. From there, she stopped making new memories. After her injury, she was put in Mashiba Hospital. She was treated there and awoke from a coma 6 months ago, though her memories only start 3 months ago when she began her memory notebook. Then, 3 months ago, she began the memory notebook because Nurse Takanashi recommended it in order to remember Mirai. That's why, 9 months after her accident, Michiru finally attempted to recover for Mirai's sake, allowing her to make new memories. 2 months ago, she saw the painting Blight for the first time because the painter Seiichi Hinohara saw how she was captivated by one of Mashiro Ushi's paintings. Her memory notebook started to fill up and she was excited for the future. The hospital said it was likely she'd be released soon, but because of that, she feared losing her memory. She didn't want the people she'd grown to care about to be left solely in the notebook. She wanted their memory in her mind. So when she saw Blight's message about loss being an eternal poison, she gained a new outlook. Then, 1 month ago, the serial murders began. The victims were Nurse Takanashi and Seiichi Hinohara. People pressed this to Michiru so that the sorrow would stick with her. And so the killer responsible for the hospital murders was... It was, in fact, Michiru Orihara. Hearing all of this, Yu pleads with Michiru to stop, to just forget everything. She's been through too much. But Michiru refuses. She has to remember and bear the guilt, so she implores Yu to tell her everything. Everything since her stay at the hospital. No more secrets. Yu reveals that he sheltered her. Yu was a witness to Michiru's attack on Mirai. He saw the whole thing. But after stabbing Mirai, Michiru was in a daze. She was in tears, unable to do anything. So Yu cleaned up the scene of the crime. He threw out Michiru's old memory notebooks because they had her murder plans documented. When the police came, Michiru wasn't questioned or considered a suspect because of her condition. So she got away scot-free and was dismissed from the hospital. But when they got home, Michiru was miserable, despondent, and always had a distant look in her eyes. She felt the pain of her deceased loved ones, even if she didn't understand why. In a sense, their memory lived on in her, as pain and sorrow. Yu couldn't bear to see it, so he took it upon himself to cleanse her memory. He wouldn't let her go outside or gain any new information on what happened. He weakened her memory by trapping her in a boring routine that would dull her mind. And he monitored her memory notebook and disposed of anything suspicious. Every day for the past month, he did that. He even kept the murder weapon to make sure Michiru wouldn't get caught. He didn't want to lose any more family, since if she was jailed, then she wouldn't have her brother. Plus, this has gotta be hard on you too, since he's her brother. He also lost his parents when that car crash happened. He didn't want to be alone, and he didn't want her to be alone. He starts weeping and says he's sorry. He wasn't enough for Michiru. She still felt lonely throughout the entire memory ordeal, even when Yu was always at her side tending to her. A revelation that causes Michiru to feel terrible, because she took her brother for granted. He was always there for her. She thought the memory notebook was her only ally, and forgot about Yu. Finally, Michiru sobs and realizes that she was selfish. She only thought of herself and not of what anyone else thought. She thought nothing of the lives she was robbing from the deceased, how it would make them feel. With that, Michiru and Yu resolve to turn themselves in. But 3 days later, before they do so, they go back to Mashiba Hospital, because Yu wants Michiru to speak to someone first. On the rooftop, it's revealed that Mirai survived. Though Michiru stabbed her, she stopped, and Mirai covered for Michiru, lying to the police that she had no idea who her would-be killer was. Why? because she cares about Michiru. Plus, well, she already said that she didn't care about living, or so live or die, it's really not a big deal to her. And with that, Michiru cries and apologizes profusely to Mirai. But Yu and Mirai comfort her. They tell her that in the end, she stopped. She realized she was wrong. The scene fades out to a shot of Yu, Mirai, and Michiru looking over the horizon. They are going to atone for what they did. They aren't going to run from it. They will turn themselves in. As Michiru reflects on the painting Blight, realizing that its message was about starting anew. It wasn't about the lingering past. It was about looking to the future, even if the misery of loss is weighing you down. And cue credits. Wow, that was a game. So I'm a big fan of, I guess, the Dream duology? I don't know. Games by Teriyaki Tomato. I loved Blank Dream, and I really liked this game. Though I do think Blank Dream is the better game and story. This game's narrative isn't exactly perfect. Like, Mirai's fake out death does help explain why Michiru gets away with murder, but at the same time the news reported that 3 people were dead, and well, actually, I guess news stations are prone to be misleading and making headlines scarier than they actually are, so that's probably accurate. Still, the story in this one is much smaller scale, because, well yeah, this game takes place entirely in one small house, and not a big mirror world. But the themes are just as strong, and the little bits of connecting tissue, like Michiru's epilogue, is really nice. But that's the old, so let's talk about the new. Michiru as a protagonist, I quite like. Like prior protagonists, she's shy and soft-spoken, but isn't dead inside. She has emotions and a strong desire which compels me, the player, to want to solve the mystery. Plus her fears are understandable, though still a bit crazy. And my friends seem to really like this game. They were big fans of Mirai. Something about a girl whose apathy towards her short lifespan allows her to help out Michiru when she's at her darkest moment. He also liked Yu because he's an understandable character. He was well-meaning and kind-hearted, but in a sticky situation. Still though, knocking out your sister is probably not a good thing to do, but we get why. After all, Michiru is a mess because of her murders. But I do want to say that, in a sense, Michiru is an inverse of Michiru, because where Michiru lost all her memories of the past and strove to make new ones, Michiru kept all her memories of the past and lost all her new ones. Michiru's conflict in the game is about preserving her memories, while Michiru's conflict in the prior game was about erasing her memories, which does package these games as a nice duology with an overarching theme on the value of memories. And I'll cherish my memories of this game. Also, to my friends, I loved playing this game with you guys, but yeah, I couldn't use most of that footage. I captured it terribly. The audio balancing is whack and basically unusable. Sorry, but hey, at least Lunar got a single line in, so that means he's the best of you 3. Anyway, I have been a Zamen, and thank you very much for watching this video. And consider sticking around if you don't hate my voice. My sole goal here is to improve my writing, editing, and speaking as I go on. Goodbye.